Out of the 3 legendaries introduced in Crystal, Suicune is definitely the tankiest out of Raikou and Entei, and while it doesn't reach the stat heights of Gold and Silver's Ho-Oh or Lugia, a base stat total of 580 is nothing to sniff at. With 115 in both defense and special defense, we're relying more on outlasting some of our later challenges rather than finishing them off as soon as possible. Because Suicune's attack is poorest, we're also setting ourselves up as a special attack. Speaking of which, one of the dichotomies of the Minimum Battles run is that you generally want a Pokemon that has a base stat total of 500 plus at least. That total for the most part captures legendary or pseudo-legendary Pokemon, and because of that, your initial learn set in the early game is always going to be pretty poor. For Suicune, that hits us harder than most. But before that, let's briefly go over the rules in place for this challenge. Rule number 1, we can only use Suicune in battle. It's a solo run after all, but we can capture other Pokemon for HM Butler purposes. Rule number 2 is we can't use items in battle, but held items are fine. Number 3 is a minimum battles run is defined as only battling the trainers / engaging in encounters that prohibit us from progressing the game. I've marked all of them in a spreadsheet in the description. Rule number 4 is no save scumming, meaning we can't save in the middle of battles for a better result, and we also can't save during the Elite Four. Now on to Suicune's learn set. The progression for Crystal works a little in our favour. We start off with Bite and Leer, which will be decent enough for the early game. At level 11, we get access to Bubble Beam, but until level 41, we're not having a great time. The TMs that Suicune can learn, while not massively varied, does give us access to a few moves like Dig, Return, and we can learn Ice Beam later on through the game corner. There are a couple of TMs I've purposely not mentioned because we'll be using them for a strat later on. There's not much to talk about in the opening parts of the game. For Falkner, we're at level 7 and have fought just 4 battles. For his Pidgey, we get a crit with Bite, Pidgey then attacks, and then we finish it off. For Pidgeotto, I decide to use Leer a few times, while Pidgeotto is content to use Gust. We've got a Berry just in case, but even with several Leers, we're not doing a great deal of damage to Pidgeotto, which will be a theme with physical attacks throughout the run. However, it ultimately doesn't stop us from getting past Falkner pretty comfortably. We then continue with Rocket, Slowpoke, Well shenanigans and decide to tackle Bugsy. By now, we're on 11 battles. Unlike in the remakes, Bugsy starts with Metapod and we're at level 12 now. Metapod can only really spam Harden, so it doesn't put up much of a fight, while Kakuna will just exist and use Poison Sting. It's the Scyther that may actually cause us some issues, and by this time Suicune has learned Bubble Beam, and I taught him Mud Slap too. However, I totally forgot that Mud Slap doesn't affect Scyther, so we wasted a turn there. Our bulkiness shines through this fight, and for some reason, instead of using solely Fury Cutter, Scyther just throws out any old move at us, which eventually allows us to defeat it. Next up is the rival, and in true challenge fashion, I put Suicune in place of Totodile. This means when the rival's Ghastly doesn't pose a problem because of Bite, the Bayleaf has absolutely no problem walling us. Because our only special move is Bubble Beam, which Bayleaf resists, along with moves like Reflect, Razor Leaf and Poison Powder, it has absolutely no problem walling us. In most battles, I switch between a combo of Mud Slap and Bite in the hopes of lowering Bayleaf's accuracy and getting the flinch off. In the actual winning battle, we pretty much use a ball out luck. Suicune uses Mud Slap, Bayleaf's Razor Leaf then misses. I then use another Mud Slap, Bayleaf claws it back with a crit Razor Leaf. I go for a third Mud Slap, Razor Leaf misses again. I then use Bite, get the flinch, Bite, another flinch, then a Bite crit, Razor Leaf misses again. Then I get a final crit with Bite to knock it out. At 14 HP, we're facing Zubat. Suicune uses Bubble Beam, Zubat attacks. Then we just use a final Bubble Beam. Now that was a fairly annoying battle that relied majorly on accuracy lowering moves, which I don't really like, but we're at level 15. There is only one trainer that stands between us and Whitney, and an error I made here is that unlike in the remakes, the trainers in Goldenrod's Underground are mandatory, but I ended up skipping them anyway. Would it have made much of a difference in the upcoming battles against Whitney? Who knows. All I can say is that my battle with Whitney should have been handed off to a bot to do a tool assisted run. Our problems with Whitney come in a few flavours and they're all salty. Number 1 is given, we're at a low level, just level 15. Number 2 is that Suicune has a shallow move pool. Number 3, Whitney's bulky Pokemon and our low physical attack. In our very first battle, even the Clefairy is causing us trouble. After we get into a back and forth, Clefairy uses Metronome and gets Pain Split. And while we eventually get past it, when Miltank comes out and our pathetic Mud Slap hardly does anything, it can just use Rollout and Stomp to destroy us. And Stomp can flinch. But that's not even the start of our problems. At one point, I decided to teach Suicune Headbutt, which you can get from the guy in Elix Forest. While its damage is comparable to Bite, it does have a slightly higher flinch rate. So for a long time, the strat was just to simply switch between Mud Slap and Headbutt, but Miltank doesn't just have Rollout and Stomp, it has Milk Drink, which restores half of its HP, and because we're doing such little damage, we can't do anything to avoid it. In terms of stalling, it's got us beaten. I was forced to have a long think about the options I had. There was Dig, which you can get from the park. Unlike in the remakes, there are no mandatory fights up to the park, you just have to be careful. The thinking here was that if you could bait the rollout, even though Dig does less damage, you could mitigate the damage somewhat. But none of it was working. I was simply taking too much damage. Though I did have a thought. There is a guy in Goldenrod's department store who'll trade you a Machop for an Abra. While we won't be using the Machop, it does hold an item, a gold berry. This item, when held, restores 30 HP. At our level, it has the potential to make a pretty big difference. However, while making a difference, it took, I don't know, like 50 battles for luck to turn in our favour. For Clefairy, we go for Headbutt. It goes for Double Slap, a move that works in our favour the most. While we go for another Headbutt, Clefairy chooses to mimic Headbutt, but it won't do it much good. While another Headbutt from us doesn't KO the Clefairy, we do get a flinch, allowing us to take it out and only get hit technically once during the fight. For Miltank, I use Mud Slap. For Miltank, I use Mud Slap as from numerous battles, we need to do everything we can to mitigate the damage of Rollout. While I only use 2, we do get some misses, but after I use Bubble Beam, Miltank uses Stomp and it does some pretty devastating damage. But the Gold Berry manages to restore us to nearly full HP. Even so, things aren't looking great. Miltank and Suicune then get into a battle of attrition, Suicune with Bubble Beam and Miltank healing every chance it gets, until finally. With that over, while it's not smooth sailing, we do have a few paths open to us after finally defeating Whitney. I decide to try the rival first after reaching Ecruteak. While our levels aren't too far off his, we really don't match up well with his Pokemon. His first Pokemon, the Haunter, is at level 20 and is able to outspeed us. On top of that, it has Curse, which it loves to use and is a bane of solo runs. And because of our poor physical attack, Bite, while it's effective, isn't even doing half damage. Basically, if the Haunter uses Curse, it's a reset. On the occasions we manage to make it past the Haunter without being cursed or paralysed by Lick, Magnemite comes out next. Our most effective move is Mud Slap. Still, that fails to do half damage either. However, it's not as trolly as the Haunter. Now we have the Bayleaf. Upon first reaching it, seeing how pathetic Headbutt is and how damaging its Razor Leaf is, I decide to not bother wasting my time. There are plenty more battles to be had. Oh, and in Crystal, unlike Gold and Silver, the rival is mandatory. So I tried my luck with the Kimono Sisters instead. Their Pokemon give a lot of good XP, and the only potentially difficult encounter would be with Jolteon. However, aside from having to run back and forth between the Pokemon Center after each battle, we can get through the Cat Cafe with relative ease. Now at level 19, I decide to give the rival another go. While Curse is still a reset, our Bite now does over half, making dealing with the Haunter and subsequently the Magnemite a lot easier. When Bayleaf finally does come out, we do get a bit of luck because it chooses not to spam Razor Leaf. Combine this with a crit and we're finally able to make our way past it. Saving the best for last, it's Zubat and we knock it out of the sky. Rather than travelling onwards to Olivine and then Chuck, we head to Morty's gym instead. We still have Bite and pretty good defences, so it's worth a shot. The trainers on the way to Morty all fall rather swiftly to Suicune's Bite, and we don't really encounter resistance until the gym leader himself. In our first encounter with Morty, we can get past the first Ghastly relatively easily. The Haunt that comes after it isn't a one-shot, which doesn't really predict a good result against Morty's Gengar. While it outspeeds and uses Mean Look, we then use Bite and it does under half. Next, Gengar uses Hypnosis, then Dream Eater, and that's about the end of it. Now, I could have gone and gotten the Mint Berry from near Moo Moo Farm to mitigate Hypnosis, but I didn't do too badly on my first try, so I'm thinking I can persevere through a few retries. But after the 6th or 7th, I just go and get the berry. When I do eventually return, things with Ghastly haven't changed, it's still a one-shot. When Haunter comes out, we use Bite. It then uses Hypnosis, which luckily misses, allowing us to use Bite again, and we get through to the Gengar with full HP. Gengar goes for Hypnosis, it misses, we then use Bite, it uses Hypnosis, and this back and forth continues until it's knocked out. All that effort to get that berry wasted. Finally, for the Haunter, we can just keep gnashing away. By the time we've taken a trip across the ocean to visit Chuck, we're level 27 and have been in 34 battles so far. Now that we actually have access to an actual decent move in the form of Surf, combined with good attack, our attacks do well over half to Primate. However, against the level 30 Poliwrath, we're not a great matchup. Even still, no one should doubt the power of Perseverance or a hard head. While Poliwrath is busy trying and failing to use either Dynamic Punch or Hypnosis, we're content to simply bash it. Puzzlingly enough, it actually works. With that done, we can tackle the Lake of Rage and the Rocket Plot until we face off with Price. He's perhaps our best matchup out of all the Johto gym leaders. Seal or Dugong don't have too much they can do against us, so we just stick to Headbutt. Even Piloswine can't stand and is taken down by a single Surf. Continuing the story of Suicune's rise to power, Jasmine is up next. While we're weak to Electric, the Magnemites can't hit us if we're underground. Even Jasmine's Steelix, an often formidable force, is simply washed away like a limp pool noodle. Our penultimate battle with the rival in Johto can be glossed over really. When we eventually reach Claire, our levels have started to outpace the gym leaders we're facing. At level 41 with 75 battles fought, courtesy of the rockets we've massacred. Our moveset now includes Aurora Beam. The first time around, we can make quick work of the Dragonairs in 1 or 2 hits. The fact it's not a one-shot doesn't do us any favours. Dragonairs love to use Thunder Wave, which isn't great for us. When this happens, even though we make it past 2 of them, when Kingdra comes out, we're on 12 HP and paralysed. Kingdra then murderises us with Hyper Beam. The secret source to victory is a spoonful of luck. For the first Dragonair, we get the Thunder Wave miss, and we can then use Aurora Beam. We do then get paralysed the next turn, plus a Thunderbolt, which Suicune tanks extremely well. Things don't start off great with the second Dragonair either, where we're paralysed on our first turn, only to take more damage. While we do eventually get off a few Aurora Beams, we're on 66 HP for Kingdra. Kingdra uses Hyper Beam. Suicune's bulkiness is really paying off now. We get a chance to use our Aurora Beams while it recharges, and when Kingdra then uses Hyper Beam again, we survive with just 1 HP. We then don't get paralysed and are able to defeat it. Luck, but not crazy luck. Like I do before every Elite Four, I gather everything I need, like potions, elixirs, and the rare candies that I'm able to get. However, I don't think I'll have to use them. Suicune's at level 43 by the time we reach the Elite Four. We're rolling with Bite, Dig, Surf, and Aurora Beam, which should, in theory, give us enough coverage with what's to come. Our luck against Will can vary. His first Xatu loves using Confuse around us, and more often than not, we spend more time hitting ourselves than the enemy. This allows Xatu to pop off attacks, and it's much the same against the Executor that follows. More often than not, we fail to make it past these two. When it comes to Jinx, its most annoying move is Lovely Kiss, which will put us to sleep. It can't really damage us much more than that though. For his Slowpoke, we're forced into relying on our weak physical and Bite. However, at our current level, it's not impossible to get past him and to Koga. For Koga, his Ariados with Giga Drain is often annoying and able to do enough damage to us that when his Venomoth comes out, it doesn't take long for it to finish us off. At this point, I concede that at level 43, we're not quite cutting it. I relented and used a couple of rare candies to see if that would even the odds a little. At first, it seems pretty positive, as we now one-shot the first Xatu. For Executor, while we're not taking it out in 1, 2 Aurora Beams will do the job. With Jinx's poor defenses, Bite works in our favour. Likewise, it now does over half to the Slowbro. For the final Xatu, we need 2 Aurora Beams, and it's times like this when Ice Beam would have made a huge difference. For Koga, Aurora Beam is now a one-shot. For Venomoth, we use Dig, which doesn't prove too effective. However, on our next turn, we crit with Surf, which I'll take. For Forretress, we can do decent damage with Surf again. And for Muck, which is pretty bulky, I first go for Surf, then switch to Aurora Beam, so it hopefully doesn't get in healing range. It seems to work, and we get through to the Crobat. Though it's quicker, it can't do much, and we're able to use another Aurora Beam to put it on ice. This is the first time I've actually made it to Bruno, and we don't have a counter for his fighting Pokemon. All we can do is rely on Suicune's special attacks, which works out well enough for the Hitmontop. And even though his Hitmonchan has Thunder Punch, our defenses are so good that it doesn't even do 20 damage. Even when Hitmonlee is sent out, we're able to get through it without much trouble. However, Machamp has different ideas. Given its high attack, its Cross Chop is pretty devastating, easily doing about third damage. While our Surfs aren't able to knock it out in 2, I was hoping that Bruno wouldn't heal, and when he does, after I'd used Aurora Beam, I was pretty sure the battle was over. But when we next use Surf, crit. Even when Onix comes out, and we've used all our Surfs, we're able to KO it with just Aurora Beam. Now for Karen. I decided to teach Suicune Headbutt instead of Bite because it's not going to do us much good going forward. Against the first Umbreon, we use Headbutt, but Umbreon then uses Confuse Ray. While we get through the first bout of confusion unscathed, the Umbreon begins trolling us with Sand Attack. One of the biggest issues with Karen in the solo run is that you can't simply swap out to negate your lower statuses. But despite that, we get through to our next Pokemon, the Vileplume. I use Aurora Beam and then get paralyzed. Unfortunately, paralysis then takes effect. Vileplume uses Petal Dance and it crits. We then get another Petal Dance and it's over. So on my very next run at the Elite Four, we progress as before, eventually reaching Karen again. This time our luck fares a little better. For Umbreon, I go straight in there with Surf, which does under half damage. Umbreon attacks with Feint Attack, which is pretty pathetic. We then use Surf again and get a crit. For the Vileplume, we stick to Aurora Beam and get another crit. This is the first time I've seen the Gengar. I go for Dig, thankfully outspeeding the Gengar, and when we resurface, we actually do pretty decent damage considering our stats. But Gengar then uses Curse. We may just be able to hang on, however. When Karen sends out Murkrow, we immediately use Aurora Beam. Thankfully, it being a one-shot means, in this gen at least, we don't take the curse damage. Finally, for Houndoom, we use Surf, and it takes it out in one. Now all we have left is Lance, and it's the first time I've ever reached him in the run. While I don't equip the Nevermelt Ice, I do keep a Paralysis Cure Berry equipped because I'm expecting those Thunder Waves. Lance starts the battle with Gyarados. I don't really have an effective move, so just decide to use Aurora Beam before settling on spamming Headbutt. And while we make it through, we're on just over half HP, which isn't great. For his first level 47 Dragonite, I go straight for Aurora Beam, and it just doesn't do enough to knock it out in one. Luckily, we then get the Thunder Wave miss, so we can use another Aurora Beam. We then do the same for the second Dragonite. This time, Thunder Wave hits, but our Berry helps us out, allowing us to knock it out. For the level 50 Dragonite, it's obviously not going to be a one-shot. However, we get Outrage, which ends up doing pretty decent damage to us. Despite that, we're still able to easily get past it. For Aerodactyl, I'm a little worried because of its speed, and it does outspeed us and use Hyper Beam. But we've seen just how bulky Suicune is, surviving on only 11 HP. For some reason, I thought Aurora Beam would be 4 times super effective, when I should have gone for Surf. But because Aerodactyl has to recharge, we make it through. Finally, we have Charizard. While we may outspeed it, I'm not sure if Surf will manage to one-hit KO it. I go for Surf, and it does, meaning we're now the champion. However, the game is far from over. Upon reaching Kanto, my brain was still in Heart Gold mode because I spent a good few minutes trying to manipulate the trash cans in Surge's gym before I actually decided to simply head up and see if the wall was blocking me. It was not. I'm at level 50, having fought 84 battles so far. However, I'm still expecting Surge to be a challenge because of our weakness to Electric. I get proven correct rather swiftly, ultimately deciding to tackle the other gym leaders first before returning to Surge later. Even though it's still a weakness, I decide to go for Erica because I have an Ice move. I've still yet to get Ice Beam, however. Erica's not too much to write home about. Her Tangela goes down in one hit from Suicune, so does the Jump Fluff and Victory Bell. For her final Pokemon, the Blossom, it takes 2 Aurora Beams and the thing doesn't even attack us. I then go through Misty and Janine, which aren't worth showing for how short the battles were. For Surge, the extra levels we've gained doesn't make the battle a short thing. However, with liberal use of Dig and a few retries, we eventually make it through. I then pick off Brock, Blaine, and finally Sabrina until we reach an actual challenge in the form of Blue. As has been said before, Blue's team has a lot of diversity to it, and with the battles we fought, we're now at level 56, which puts us just shy of his higher level Pokemon. Blue's first Pokemon, the Pidgeot, is rarely a problem, especially now we've taught Suicune Ice Beam, which you can get from the man outside the Goldenrod Game Corner. Blue likes to go with Exeggutor next, but its higher special defense means that it can tank an Ice Beam. However, a combo of Headbutt and Ice Beam is usually enough to deal with it. For the Alakazam, while Psychic does a lot of damage, a combo of Headbutt and Ice Beam can take it down. Unfortunately, Gyarados is up next, so we're left relying on Headbutt and hoping that flinches can see us through. Unlike Lance's Aerodactyl, we really don't tank Gyarados' Hyper Beam as well this battle, leaving us on a nice bit of HP. Rhydon is next, and I'm hoping Ice Beam is enough to deal with it, which it is. Finally is Blue's Arcanine. I'm expecting Extreme Speed, which I get, but it barely does anything. When we retaliate with Surf, it's a definite one-shot. Now our final challenge is Red, and this time around it had to be one of the toughest Red battles I've had. If we look at how we match up, we're firstly inevitably going in at a low level. Up until this point we've been in 104 battles, and that is all we are getting. We're weak to his Pikachu and Venusaur, and we won't fare well against his Espeon with Psychic. More often than not, we're stumbling at the very first hurdle. Pikachu likes to use Thunder, and it does a ton of damage. Our only effective move is Dig. Pikachu often likes to use Charm first, which sharply decreases our attack, meaning that when we eventually hit with Dig, we're hardly doing anything. In the event we make it past Pikachu, Red will often send out Venusaur next. We're 20 levels below it. While the first time we get Clutch Freeze, allowing us to knock it out, Espeon will then come out. Our lack of fighting prowess, combined with Espeon's Psychic, is able to just scythe through us. It's apparent we've hit a wall, and rather early on. However, I still do have all those rare candies that I picked up, so it's now or never. Leveling up, Suicune can learn Mirror Coat. This move is a special attack version of Counter, and like Counter, its drawback is that you have to take a hit first. While this strategy is somewhat effective against the Espeon, we're still in a position where we're taking far too much damage to get through just 2 Pokemon. And even if we get through Red's first 2 Pokemon, we've still got Snorlax to contend with. With our pathetic attack stat and Snorlax's dummy thick special defense, we can barely scratch this thing. More often than not, Snorlax can then use Body Slam and just take us down. So we're in a bit of a pickle. In another strat, in an attempt to counter the Snorlax, I teach Suicune Toxic and roll into the battle with the Quick Claw to at least get ahead of a few Pokemon. However, stall tactics only really work if you can heal or somehow mitigate damage against the opposing Pokemon. Given how much damage Snorlax can do, we're not currently in a position to attempt that. Even Leftovers isn't helping a great deal. As I battle Red again and again, I start to try out some different strats. On the Smogon site, you can check out various builds for Pokemon that are often used in competitive battles. Luckily for us, Suicune has an entry for Gen 2. That setup consists of Surf, Toxic or Ice Beam, Rest, and Sleep Talk or Roar. For our purposes, I go with Rest, Ice Beam, Toxic, and Sleep Talk. Sleep Talk's a move that will randomly select one other move when your Pokemon is sleeping. While this strategy is a good start, we're still in a position where the likes of Pikachu and Venusaur can easily outperform us in the damage department. It even took me several battles just to get to Snorlax to see if this strat worked, with Espeon often blocking us. Body Slam still does a little under half damage, so we're in a game of timing when the best point to use Rest is, along with hoping that Snorlax doesn't use Rest itself. Suffice it to say, our Rest Toxic combo ultimately won't work because of Snorlax's ability to use Rest. Again, we've seemed to have hit a bit of a brick wall. So I went back and I looked at Suicune's move pool. Now, I did mention the move Return before. Another move that Suicune can learn is Curse. Curse lowers your speed, but increases your attack and defense. Given we weren't really outspeeding the majority of Red's Pokemon anyway, this isn't a massive trade-off. With a combo of Curse, Rest, Return, and Sleep Talk, we might just be able to make it through. Against the Pikachu, we start setting up Curse. There's not really a favourable move we want Pikachu to use. The best outcome is getting Charm to fail, and when it does, Return is able to knock it out. We're now through to Venusaur on full health. Because our speed is lower, Venusaur goes first with Sunny Day. I use Return, it crits, but it doesn't knock it out. Venusaur then uses Synthesis. I use Return, and it crits. For Espeon, it firstly sets up Reflect. Now my Return does around a quarter, leaving it to use Psychic and do decent damage. Expecting Psychic, I use Rest and then go for Sleep Talk. We use Return and nearly knock it out. Another Psychic and a special defense drop. Sleep Talk thankfully uses Return, but even though we've knocked out the Espeon, we're on 69 HP and asleep going into the Snorlax. I'm still somehow able to go first and use Rest. Snorlax uses Amnesia, which won't do it any good. Sleep Talk Return does about a quarter, another one later, and Snorlax is under half HP. Body Slam maybe does 1/6, but our Leftovers is now giving us back health. I use Curse, then it's Snorlax's time to use Rest. While it's napping, I start setting up the curses. Even when Snorlax attacks, it's doing pathetic damage. We just take our time and rest when we have to, but Snorlax gets a crit while we're sleeping. Despite Return doing good damage, we probably can't tank another crit. I'm now aware of just how close I am to running out of PP for Sleep Talk, which isn't helped by Suicune using Sleep Talk Rest 3 times in a row. Snorlax then gets another clutch crit, taking us down to 50 HP. We managed to tank another before using Rest again. Snorlax crits again. I've now run out of Sleep Talk and I'm getting pretty frustrated. Finally, I'm able to use 2 returns to knock it out. Now, this is the first time I've seen Blastoise. It uses Surf, I use Return, it doesn't knock it out, however our second one does the job. Red's last Pokemon, Charizard, then comes out. Flamethrower is good, but not as good as Return, and we knock it out. And that is Red, clocking in at 105 battles fought. In conclusion, there were a lot of ups and downs in that run. Having to rely on Suicune's bulk was probably what got us through in the end. I'd say the battle with Red was the most interesting. I never expected to be using rest curse strats to push us over the line, but when it's a minimum battles run, you have to use everything in your limited arsenal. But hey, maybe you could have made the run even easier. Feel free to let me know, and I've also included a list of all the trainers I fought and their locations in the description if you're interested. If you have an idea for an interesting run in the same style, let me know, and if you want to like or subscribe, go for it. Until next time, have a good one.